Hey guys, so today I'm going to be doing one of my more in-depth reviews on a Linux distribution. This is where I take a Linux distribution and then use it as my primary driver for a couple of weeks and then sort of let you guys know how I get on with it. Today we're going to be taking a look at Antergos, available from antergos.com, and I've got quite a long list of notes. Now, this is a rolling release. It is based on Arch, and it was by far the most popular and widely requested distribution that I take a look at. So I've been using it now for a couple of weeks, and generally I'm really enjoying it actually. It's a great distribution if you want to get sort of bleeding edge software, but you're not too scared to roll up your sleeves and fix a problem once in a while. Although that being said, it's still less buggy than I thought it would be. I guess when it comes to rolling distributions, I do have a bias against them, but I suppose now that I'm exposing myself to more and more rolling release-based distributions, I'm becoming more confident in dealing with them, and I'm sort of seeing that they're more stable than I sort of previously thought, I guess, is the way that I talk about it. So this is a lot closer to its Arch roots than the last distribution I talked about, Manjaro, and a lot of people have referred to Antergos more as an Arch installer rather than an actual separate distribution in and of itself, and I can see why they think that, because it is very closely linked to Arch. You can see that it's more like it gives Arch Linux a graphical user interface that's very user-friendly, really, pretty much. It also lets you have access to the Arch user repositories, which allows you to get just about any kind of software package that has been compiled for any Linux distribution to run on your desktop, which is fantastic. So there are a lot of good things going for it, and I've got a lot of notes I'm going to talk about. So the first on my list of notes is the website, actually. This is a factor in the overall distribution that a lot of distributions miss, because I guess it's not the core essence of what it is that they're working on and the core essence of the project itself. But if you want to, of course, bring new people in to try out a distribution, explaining what makes your distribution unique and, you know, sort of taking into account the user base and facilitating that in how you present and sort of write copy for your website is a big deal. And Antergos have done a very, very, very good job at that. So yes, the first thing that I was taken back by is the fantastic website that Antergos have got. They explain the things that new users, particularly new Linux users as well, even though I wouldn't brand this as necessarily a newbie-friendly distribution. Maybe if you were sort of quite new to Linux but were very keen to sort of roll up your sleeves, I might recommend something like Antergos. But it's a very newbie-friendly website, and it does make you feel more confident in trying out the distribution. It makes it feel like it's very actively maintained, that there's a very strong and vibrant community. All of the instructions are very easy to follow, and considering I was trying out a new distribution from a family that I'm not particularly, or a family of distributions that I'm not particularly familiar with, that was actually very, very helpful, and it sort of pointed me in a lot of directions on where to look for help when problems did arise. Another thing that I didn't see, or that you don't see in many distributions, is the ability to choose software that you're going to install from the distribution installer. So when you're installing the operating system, it gives you a few tick boxes so that you can install some software alongside it as well. This is fantastic for a whole number of reasons. So one thing about it is that you will download a lot of updates, and those updates will be large in size. So that means that if you don't have a particularly fast internet connection, you could very well be waiting on updates for a long time, because you are switching out programs for newer versions as those newer versions become available. It does give you a fantastically bleeding edge system, but again, it is a lot to download. So being able to install software and being able to choose what software runs on your machine from the install process actually minimizes the amount of updates that you need, because it means that you're not updating software and packages that you don't use. And when it comes to rolling releases, that's something that you should bear in mind. If you have just like a scheduled regular Ubuntu release, you can pull down and download a piece of software, use it, run it. If it's not for you, just ignore it. But with a rolling distribution like Antergos, you might want to consider uninstalling it, just so that it's less stuff to update later on down the line, and potentially less things to go wrong or less bandwidth to use. So the ability to choose from things like LibreOffice and the Steam, you can actually install Steam from the installer. That's a very, very good idea, and that's something that I wish pretty much all distributions would try, actually, because it's just a matter of customization and a really user-friendly way of doing it. Now, that being said, this is where I also hit my first bug, which was that not all of the software selection that I chose at install actually made its way onto the final distribution. I selected to install LibreOffice, and that was installed, but I also selected to install Steam and the Steam and the games tools, and that they weren't installed. They were easy enough to install post, once the operating system was up and running, but I just feel that maybe it was a bug that, I don't know, will presumably be phased out in time. But that being said, again, it's not a showstopper, it's just something that happened. The package manager, again, I really felt at home and at ease in using that package manager, even from the very first time. That being said, that's partly because I know the package names of the software that I'm looking for and stuff that and I already have an idea about what software that I use for my day-to-day use in Linux. If I was coming across from Windows, working out what packages meant what package names where it's not immediately obvious, or that it's not super newbie friendly, it's not like an app store, it is very much a package installer. So you do need to know that, say, Open Broadcast Software is going to be known as OBS Studio in the package repositories. It's not a major thing, but and for someone that's who knows how their system works, it's in fact arguably a positive. But it's certainly not something that's newbie friendly, so it kind of goes against the grain there. But again, it's a very good package manager, very comfortable. I felt very comfortable using it. I knew exactly where I was. Even installing stuff from the Arch user repositories, which are less stable and less supported, but they do have software that isn't included in the main distribution. So it's good actually. I generally give it a very positive reception. In regards to NVIDIA drivers, because of course I run a NVIDIA GeForce 970, which is a very, very good card, but because it is quite new, or at least it was quite new until until lately, it had sort of spotty support across Linux distributions. Ubuntu was the best for it, and Ubuntu-based distributions were the best for it. But then again, now that the NVIDIA drivers has sort of diffused into the wider Linux atmosphere, or ecosystem rather, I guess, it's less of a problem now. I did have to download and install my NVIDIA drivers deliberately and separately, which again is something that I required knowledge of my card and knowledge of my computer that maybe a newbie might not necessarily have. But I had no problems installing it, and I had no problems getting it up and running. So again, it's a minor additional step, but I gotta say, if a Linux distribution does take that step and install NVIDIA drivers on install off the bat, that's a big thumbs up. So Antergos didn't necessarily get that. Manjaro did, but there you go. Again, minor point. Another thing I really liked about the installer is that you get to choose your desktops from installer. You download one installer, and then during that installer it says, do you want to use Gnome, do you want to use KDE, do you want to use XFCE, LXDE, all that kind of stuff. Mate, I think, was in there. It gave you a list of all the major desktop environments that you could actually and you could pick one to install and use. I wouldn't recommend having more than one desktop environment, again, on a rolling distribution, unless you have a mega fast internet connection. But again, being able to choose your desktop environment on install, so that you don't have various different ISOs that you have to work out which is which and all that kind of stuff. Again, something very easy for someone established in Linux, but very confusing, or potentially very confusing for someone new to the platform as a whole. But yeah, a fantastic idea. I wish more distributions would be, would do that. And I know that it's an extra step in downloading. If you want an out-the-way desktop environment, that's a little more downloading that you have to do, but it is for user friendliness, and I think that that's worthwhile. It also didn't detect my United Kingdom keyboard, but that was just setting a few settings in GNOME. There was an upgrade, actually. There was an upgrade for the GNOME desktop, and that broke some of the third-party add-ons that were installed. So that was a problem that I had. That being said, though, the GNOME desktop, which is the desktop that I chose for Antergos, was beautifully crafted. It used the Numix theme, which is a nice step away from the traditional GNOME themes, and they made it look fantastically beautiful and polished, and they made it look like attention to detail was given. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate among distributions, particularly community-centric distributions, which kind of have this stereotype of being amateurish and being a sort of a hobbyist distribution. So it's nice to see community-based distributions put on a bit of polish and make themselves look really professional, really polished, just like the website with Antergos, just like the desktop environment with Antergos. So they've done a great job there at actually just sort of marketing their distribution to their actual user base and just making it so that it looks like a professional, well put together distribution. And it is, and things like this show it. So there was only one big problem, which I'm sure that many Antergos users are going to know that I'm going to bring up at some point. And there was a pretty big break with the LightDM, the desktop manager, in the sense that there was this bug that sort of rendered it unusable, actually. So it came as a result of a GNOME upgrade, but it broke compatibility with LightDM, as I understand it. So what happened is that you would boot up your computer and then you click somewhere on the screen and it would just go blank white. You could still log in if you could sort of remember the procedure without your screen, and then it would log in and everything would be fine. It's just the login screen effectively broke. Now that was easy enough to fix, and they did put out update advisories, and they did try and sort of dissipate as much information about this problem as possible, and the way that they handled it was actually really, really good. It gave me a bit of confidence in the Antergos community as well, that they were serious about getting problems fixed, and they didn't leave their user base on their own. That being, and it was easy enough to switch out LightDM, the desktop manager, with the GNOME DM, and then all was fine. It was an easy problem to fix. There was plenty of documentation about it very shortly after the issue occurred. So I got to say, the Antergos community really sort of was on top of it, actually, as well. On top of a problem that does happen from time to time with rolling distributions. Usually a good way to solve a lot of problems with rolling distributions is if it's a minor package or a minor application that breaks in an update process. Maybe it's a dependencies issue, maybe it's just the software itself had that bug in it and it just came through in the system. It's always worth just switching that piece of software out for another one, and that's usually the problem solved. If it's a big application, something like Steam or maybe like VLC, LibreOffice, Firefox, Chromium, then it's a bigger issue because that's something that you're a little bit closer to as a piece of software. But for the majority of pieces of software, like for example desktop managers, you're fine. You can just switch them out. So on the wider Antergos community, and I do think that the quality and the type of people in a community surrounding a Linux distribution is important, I found them to be absolutely fantastic, very patient with me when working through some of the setting up bugs, and I say bugs, some of the setting up problems as well, and just not knowing the nuances of the system. They were very, very helpful, they were patient, and they sort of made you feel like there was someone there helping you with a problem, even if that problem was something that you need to work on with other people, where you would be sort of educated in a procedure and how to fix it, rather than just stick this in the command line. So an absolutely fantastic community, very, very helpful, very, very patient. And the number of bugs that I actually did face, because I know I've been talking a lot about bugs and a lot about instability issues in this video, in all fairness, once the system was up and running, and there was a lot of tweaking involved in getting the system up and running, but once it was up and running, it was fine for the most part. It was generally good as a daily driver, fantastic as a daily driver, really. So I certainly give this distribution a thumbs up. I think there's a huge amount of potential there. I think that as it currently stands, it's a pretty fantastic distribution, and I'd have no problem using it as my daily driver. Nice up-to-date packages, nice selection of software, even from the Arch user repository, which means that you don't have to, like you might do in an Ubuntu-based distribution, add in third-party repositories and all that kind of stuff, which do decrease stability. So at least you've got your software infrastructure all together with an Arch-based distribution like Antergos, and it's covered all of everything that I needed it for. So that's absolutely fantastic. It's a fantastic distribution. I would like to see it make its way higher and higher up the rankings list as time goes on, but it is still a reasonably newish distribution, so it will take time, but all things look amazingly promising, and it is a distribution that I would recommend to maybe intermediate Linux users that might want to see what Arch is like without actually having to go through a command line install process. I have installed Arch before using the command line process, but I gotta say, a graphical installer makes it 10 times easier. So I guess that's about my review. As a day-to-day driver, I absolutely found it fantastic. It's a very well implemented GNOME desktop. It's a fantastically up-to-date and extensive package library. It is a fantastically helpful and vibrant community surrounding it. And whereas it certainly has its occasional faults here and there, those are faults that I have no doubt will be fixed over the course of time, and look forward to seeing what Antergos is going to grow into. So if you are looking for a new Arch-based distribution to try out, well, Antergos is certainly a top contender. So that's about it from me today. Please let me know what you think of Antergos, those of you that have tried it, down in the comment section below. But also, if you have any requests or ideas on what kind of Linux distribution you'd like me to use as a daily driver in a future video where I talk about my sort of day-to-day usage of a distribution, please again let me know in the comments section below. I won't necessarily sort of take them as requests because I'm sort of looking to do a variety of Linux distributions, and I'm going to focus around the more, not necessarily user-friendly ones, but the more sort of ones that are not specific, ones that are not designed for specifically advanced Linux users, but really more of a general purpose Linux distribution. So thanks very much for watching. That's about it from me today, and until next time, I've been Chris Ware, and you've been awesome. Take care now.